And we're live! Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alicia.
Good morning, Sean.
We're doing Who Makes the News like this today, just to see if it works, mostly.
So you guys can see our faces now.
But primarily, Alicia, what is Who Makes the News?
Who Makes the News is basically the daily part of the radio program that we have, where we go through the media, the print media, sometimes the television media, and any online media as well, to take a look at the stories that are kind of making the waves, so to speak, and seeing if they're gender balanced or not.
Of course, it's part of the larger global media monitoring project, and really taking a look at who holds the speaking power. And I guess we have a couple of headliners today, which may not have been the official headlines, but at least it's decided they're important.
They are important. Well, all news is good news, right? No, that's not it.
No news is good news.
No news is good news, but this news is, I think, interesting. Well, for me anyway. Basically talking about mental health. The budget for the health ministry on mental health is apparently 1.9% of their total budget. So it's really quite shocking, actually, to see that statistic, be available, but at least it's now available. So now we know, okay, maybe there's more room for lobbying, to increase the budget for the mental health facilities and services in Fiji. So that's one of the top stories that I've highlighted. And the second one is that government has given 2 50-year leases to families in Naitasiri for basically farming practices.
How exciting. Now, I mean, particularly in terms of the mental health, and we didn't talk about it on Who Makes the News yesterday, but there are some alarming rates of suicide at the moment. I think it's been freaking everybody out that it's been approximately 100 completed suicides rather than attempted suicides in per year for the past 4 years, which is, I think, 4 times the number of road fatalities, but also just generally it's not a great number.
It's really interesting as well, because when you see the headlines in the TV news, for example, but also the front page or the first couple of 3 pages of the papers, you'll more often than not see the road fatality stories making the papers, making the news, than you would story on completed suicide or attempted suicide, unless it's something very shocking like the most recent case that we had with the 3 teenage boys attempting suicide, and they have all passed away, unfortunately, because of it. So yeah, I think I'm just really shocked at that figure, 1.9%.
Yeah, and I mean, it calls for the larger issue of, in the next year's national budget, will they really be thinking about how do we improve mental health care in the country? Because at the moment, the only kind of mental health care is one terrifying institution that has name not only in terms of general stigma, and I think the former health minister kind of alluded to the fact that there was a lot of stigma around the words St. Giles, which is our only sort of hospital that caters to mental health patients. But we also have a lack of psychologists, so if you're looking for counseling or any of that kind of stuff, there isn't very much. I think there are a few psychiatrists, and I think it was also, I mean, it was something that I used to follow quite a lot, because one of my former colleagues, Tamara, was a very passionate mental health care advocate as somebody who was pursuing psychology. That unfortunately a lot of the times if people do attempt suicide, that's the only time that they end up even considering counseling or any of that kind of thing, even if you're thinking about antipsychotics, but just generally in terms of stress and otherwise. It's kind of like that buzzing noise. It's just kind of there, and you don't really want to address it because it might make other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you said stress as well, because that was something that was talked about in the article. The source for the article is the psychologist, I think. Well, basically it's a woman, so that's good, because, looking at this article from a gender perspective, we've got a female in the position of, professionalism and expert in this area, which is more often than not the case.
Yeah, you usually just have the health minister, kind of.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because apparently she did an awareness program for the parliamentarians, kind of putting it into perspective for them to say, if you don't address, causes of stress, stress factors, then it could lead to, she put it this way, affecting productivity, the work, absenteeism, which could, lead to debt, which it's like a vicious cycle, basically.
Yeah. I love how we always have to talk about productivity whenever it comes to larger social issues. It was at the PIDF summit at one of the parallel sessions, one of the first parallel sessions, I think. It was a private sector parallel session at the 3rd Pacific Islands Development Forum Summit, where they were talking about green-blue Pacific economies. So it's climate change, but also development, and how do you balance everything. And so basically the private sector in the room were told it's just like domestic violence. If you don't treat the issue or deal with the issue in a forward-thinking manner, you're going to have problems with your productivity. And so that was really uncomfortable.
And it's really interesting how they always they go back to the economy and economic indicators, for kind of showing that this, you're doing well because your economy is growing, because the money, like the dollar signs are there. But it's about, well, what about the less tangible indicators, like happiness, for example, or, feeling comfortable, feeling like you are able to, leave home or go to work. And it's very kind of one-sided, maybe I would call it, when you're looking at that.
And also in terms of the distribution of wealth, you can have an economy grow, but if you're not having the poorest person being able to afford proper living or good living standards, then how well off is your economy really?
Yeah, I mean, I've just completed like 25 women's household income expenditure surveys from Tavua, I believe, and the majority of women there are saying that they can't afford milk because it's too expensive, but they need it because they have children who are under the ages of 5. So we're just thinking, okay, you don't have enough money, but yet you're saying, our nation is secure.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
And then if somebody can't afford milk is $3 a liter, I think, but then it's even more expensive to get formula. And so if you can't necessarily afford the amount of formula that you need, a lot of people water it down, but then the kids get diarrhea and then the babies die. It's very sad.
Yeah.
And so if these aren't indicators that, those who are making decisions are actually considering, then that's not bad. No. But give people land, it'll fix everything.
So that's what the second story is about, going back to that article about agricultural leases for families in Naitasiri. It's part of the government giving land to the People's Community Network to make sure that families do have a source of nutrition. But just as you said, Sean, give people land and that'll solve their problems. Unless they don't have the tools to farm the land, then you've got a whole other issue.
Or the knowledge at all.
Yeah. And what about climate?
Yeah, and so it's something that the women have been raising, even in traditional agricultural communities, or in the West and in the North, you have a number of communities that have had to move around because, they've been displaced or otherwise. How do you, one, gain the knowledge? How, two, do you access the tools? And particularly if you're looking at youth and younger people, how are they supposed to be using this as a source of livelihood? If not in terms of income, at least securing their, securing food and addressing their food security. But if you don't know what to do to grow the things, because it takes a while to grow the things. And then again, like you just mentioned, we're coming up to one of the seasons where we're kind of more likely to have cyclones and the such, although we could probably have cyclones whenever the cyclones feel like it now. How do you go about recovering from the damage to crops? And even if it's not even a cyclone, but excessive flooding or extended dry spells,
which continues.
The extended dry spell does continue, yes. Not in Suva for some reason. It won't stop raining in Suva. But how do you really cope with all these kinds of things? It's not just a matter of have a space, but what do we do with all this soil?
And how do we ensure that when something, needs fixing or needs attention, you can go to whoever is in charge in terms of governance, the government, and other stakeholders to say, this is the problem, can you help me with this? And making sure that those processes are equal and inclusive for women and, marginalized communities.
As well, because I think it's written in your notes that there were no women in the story at all.
In either stories. So, sorry, no, the first one did have a woman.
Yay!
I stand corrected. So it's 50-50.
Yeah, 50-50 in terms of the two stories.
But I mean, kind of reflecting on, the agricultural articles themselves, whether it's from the government or whether it's from, the reporters themselves, it is very much gender blind. So they don't include the women in. I mean, I could have picked, a number of articles on agriculture because there were several, and it's kind of disappointing to note that it is gender blind. They don't kind of take into account the fact that women, are organisers when it comes to their families and their wider community's food security. So when that's kind of overlooked in the media, you just kind of think, okay, so what does it say about women?
And we've generally found that, particularly in the backyard garden context, when it is your family food security, women are spearheading those kinds of efforts. And women are also, particularly in village and community settings, very concerned because the men have basically stopped planting. The youth have no interest. And so the women have had to kind of take over responsibility of trying to figure out, how do I grow these things or sell these things or that kind of stuff. But again, the largest systematic issues of it, excluding women from the agricultural sector, means that they have harder times trying to get access to land. It's much harder to get access to tools. And then it's also much harder to get access to additional funding. So if they want it to be something that's sustainable, something that is a source of income, it's a little bit more challenging because, generally women are left out of the formal economy in so many other ways. So yeah, it's just kind of disappointing that the media's not picking up on this, which is why we do what we do.
That's why we've got alternative media, community media, making it more inclusive and open for everyone. Everyone. But that is it for the articles today in Who Makes the News. If you want to comment about anything that you've heard today, you can always give us a call. Our number that you can reach us on is 3318160, or you can send your email to info@feminpacific.org.fj. And if you want to get up to date on anything that we do in terms of activities and policies and little things that we write, you can follow us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/feminpacific, like our page, and then get reading. People.
Yeah, there's literally stuff put up every single weekday. And so also, because this is a video online, you can always comment in the video itself. But generally, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yep.